There we go. All right, so an official welcome to everybody to this winter waterfowl virtual event. I'm very excited that we were able to do this, and thank you all for coming and for your interest in Rhode Island's wildlife. So if you get a chance to watch the video, you saw Gabby and I running around in the woods being a little silly, talking about how we are funded, how the Division of Fish and Wildlife is funded. So if you didn't get to see the video, essentially we are primarily funded through the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program. So that is funding that is generated on through an excise tax on firearms, ammunition, and archery equipment. So whether you're a hunter or a sport shooter, your purchase of that equipment goes directly into wildlife conservation. That's pretty much our sole source of funding. We do have some state wildlife grants, which is like an offshoot of that program, to assist with species of greatest conservation need, which could be like non-game species, like a salamander, but things like sea ducks, all of that research and monitoring, all of that work is funded directly through wildlife and sport fish restoration. So it's just something to make folks aware of, that, you know, everything is interconnected. So it's a really cool system to fund wildlife conservation that's been in effect since 1937. So we're grateful for that, and that's helped recover a lot of wildlife over the course of the history of America. All right, so let's jump ahead to our next slide. So Gabby and I were in a management area in that little video, and we have management areas all across the state. These are different from your state parks. They are generally much larger. You know, we hail from the Great Swamp down here in West Kingston. That's where our headquarters is. But Arcadia is an extensive management area, really big. You know, this northwest corner has a lot of land that's conserved up there. So the whole point of our management areas is to conserve as much habitat as we can, and try to connect habitats. So the more connected a habitat is, the better it is for wildlife, because that means wildlife don't have to travel, you know, across as many roads or through people's yards, etc. So this continuity in habitat is really, really important. So you can see there's, you know, not too much here in the Providence area. There's a little bit up in the Blackstone Valley area at Diamond Hill. So it's actually across the street from Diamond Hill Park. Diamond Hill Management Area is a piece of undeveloped land. It's very beautiful. So these are places that you can go visit. You can bring your dogs. We ask that dogs are leashed while you're there, just to protect wildlife and to protect your dogs as well, keep everybody safe. You can horseback ride in some of them. You can hike, bird watch, fish, and hunt. So these are primarily the places where people are fishing and hunting. And a good chunk of these, like the Great Swamp, was solely purchased with that wildlife and sport fish restoration money. So it's you know, they're multi-use properties, but the main purpose is for wildlife habitat conservation and for that hunting and fishing opportunity. And I can put a link in the chat for if you'd like to see, you know, more detailed map. Obviously, this one's very, very primitive, but there's a great little resource if you just type in dem.ri.gov/maps into your browser. That will bring you to a plethora of maps in the DEM map room, and the one that you want to take a look at is outdoor recreation map. That will give you trails, will give you hunting areas, trailheads, parking, so you can kind of toggle around with those settings in there. So it's a great resource if you're interested in visiting a management area. One thing to note though, because hunting is allowed on our management areas, you do have to wear fluorescent orange. So if you can see Gabby in the frame, she's got her fluorescent orange hat. She's not at a management area, she's up at Colt State Park today. But it's always a good idea to be putting on your orange from September all the way through May. So September starts the archery deer season, and all the way through May, so that's April and May is our spring turkey. So essentially what you got to wear is what Gabby's wearing, a hat, 200 square inches. The only exception is in December, where you have to wear 500 square inches. So you'd be looking like this with a hat and a vest. That's me with my dog. But you know, general rule of thumb, I usually try to wear the vest over the hat anyways, because that's just the more visibility you can give, the better. And fluorescent orange is key. You know, yellow, pink, green doesn't show up nearly as well as fluorescent orange. So that's just to keep everybody safe in the woods, and to show courtesy to you know, our hunters who are out there. We talk to a lot of hunters and they go, nobody's wearing orange. Like it's a big issue. So the more people who know about this, the better. And if you don't know whether you're going to a management area, I don't know, some land trust properties allow hunting, some nature conservancy properties allow hunting. So we have like a cooperative agreement with them. So I would just say, grab an orange vest, grab a hat, leave it in your car. If you're going to be going anywhere in the woods from September to May, it's just a good idea to have it with you. So that's some intro stuff. So now we're going to kind of jump ahead. We had planned to talk about this a little later in the presentation, but when nature is cooperative, sometimes you have to shift your schedule. So Gabby is out at Colt State Park, assisting with a collaborative waterfowl tracking study that's being done between URI and DEM. So she's out there with Tori, who is a PhD student at URI, who will be tracking brant, Atlantic brant, American black ducks, and common goldeneye. Which, if you are not familiar with what a goldeneye is, we'll go over that in a little bit. And then this is Jenny, our waterfowl biologist. And I'll let Gabby take over. So I'm going to make Gabby, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to make Gabby our focal video, so we'll be able to see all the things that she is seeing out there in the field. Spotlight your video, Gabby, and this should work. There we go. Okay, now we can see you.
Hello, everybody. So it is very cold out, so I apologize that my nose is running everywhere. I have a big scarf on, but I'm out here at Colt State Park. So like Mary mentioned before, we have management areas, which are separate than state parks. So Fish and Wildlife, we are the ones that help manage those management areas. And then state parks are the one that manage the parks. So they're really different. You can see at Colt State Park, you know, there are benches, all manicured, there's places for people to walk around. But it is actually really great habitat for brant. So they come up here onto the grass, which you could see earlier before the snow. They come up onto the grass and they'll just kind of eat the grass. And so what we did today is we came out here at high tide, where we knew that the brant usually are. We set up a big net that spans just a little bit across this field, and we attached rockets to that net. So it has 4 rockets that are attached to the back of it. We put out decoys and we played brant sounds, and we just sat and we waited really quietly until the brant saw those decoys, those fake brant sitting there in the grass, and they thought, oh, that's a safe place for me to go. So they flew in, they landed right in front of the net, and then we shot those rockets out, and they pulled the net over those brant and trapped them right inside. So we actually shot the net twice today, which is pretty rare, because the first time we shot, we only got 5 brant, and then the second time we got a lot. So this is the most brant that they've caught during the study. We have almost 60 brant here today. So really pretty impressive catch today. So we catch those brant, we put them into little holding crates, and then we take them out one by one and we band them, and we are putting transmitters on them. So I'll show you that process now. So I'm gonna go over to where everybody's getting ready to band. I'm gonna put my mask on though. I apologize if I sound muffled. I'm just gonna switch my screen. Here we go. Okay, so here are the crates that we put the brant in. You can see they're just nice and nestled right in there. So it's a nice place for them to rest and for us to hold them while we're waiting to process them. And then we've got our awesome field techs right here. So we've got Megan, Shannon, and then Jenny, who is our waterfowl biologist. So these guys are getting some bands on them right now. So this is a safe way to hold them. And we've put a metal band and some colored bands on them. And then what's going on with this guy over here? So this guy's got all measured up. So we take a head length, we use calipers to measure the length of their head, and then the length of their tarsus, so their leg. We sex them, we age them so we can tell if they're an adult or a juvenile. So I'll see if I can find a juvenile, if there's any left in here. Let's see. We've got a bunch still in the crate to process. So there's a bunch more in the crates. I'm not seeing any. So the juveniles, or the hatch years, they'll have kind of like these white bars on them. But these guys, they look pretty clean, brown on top. So these ones look like we only have adults left in here. But you can see, brant are really, really beautiful birds. They're geese, but a little bit different than our Canada geese. You can see they have that kind of black head and chest, and then that brown body. With just a little bit of white on the neck. They're really pretty elegant looking birds. And then over, and this is Tori, so this is her project that she's working on. So our partners at the University of Rhode Island, and they've attached this transmitter to the back of the brant. So it's kind of like a little backpack that they wear, and that allows them to track the brant to see kind of where they're moving around and where they're going. And once the birds have either a transmitter on them or bands on them or both, depending on their weight, we go over here and we pop them in this little tent. But I think we actually released our first batch, so I'm not sure if we have any in here, but they get a nice little tent. Oh no, there's some in there actually. Yeah, we got some processed in there. So they get a nice little tent to sleep in, to rest in, and then we'll let them all go together because they like to stay together. So we don't want to separate them. We release them all at once, and then we can kind of see where they go with those transmitters, and we can get some more information. Oh, here we go. Megan's got a bird for us. She's gonna put it in the tent. So you just slip them right in there, pop them right in, and then they're nice and cozy with their friends. So yeah, so we can either see where they've gone with those transmitters, or we can see where they've gone through that band data. So each of these geese has a metal band. So if we actually catch it in the net again, then we'll be able to have it in hand and read that band. And they also have colored bands that have special letter and number code on them, so we can tell from far away. If we see them like through binoculars, we'll be able to tell what goose is which and where they went, and where they ended up, and if they come back here. And the reason that we're doing this study is so we can kind of figure out how aquaculture affects the movements of geese and ducks. So we're also going to next year be trapping some goldeneye and see what they're doing. So today was a really great day for brant trapping, but it's been a very long day, especially for Jenny and Megan and Shannon, because they went and they actually trapped black ducks this morning also. So they started at like 2 a.m. and they're still here processing these birds. It'll probably take another, I don't know, at least 2 hours, I'd say, to process the rest of them. So they've had a very, very long day, but a very good day. Good accomplishment here for brant trapping. Definitely more than like the typical, few geese that we get in the trap. So all these geese are happy, they're healthy, and they're getting ready to go. Some of them have, like I said, been released in a big group already. It's just beautiful out here.
I was gonna say, it looks nice and snowy.
It is. It's crazy because when I got here this morning, it was grass, and now it's snow.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
fast
there was no snow here this morning, and I think actually because the snow was coming in right when we were trapping, I think that kind of drove the geese to up on shore even more than they normally would, because they knew that it was going to be all covered, so they wanted to eat as much as they could before the cold weather came. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I'm gonna assist these guys with banding a little bit more to help them get out of here a little bit faster. Also, my phone might die because it's so cold, but I'll stay on as long as I can, and I might just hop back on at the end, and we can show you some more brant up close and answer any questions that you guys have.
Yeah, Gabby, if you can, if you want to hop off and then hop back on, maybe we can see them released and we can watch them all fly on their merry way.
We'll see if we're done by then.
I don't know. We'll see what time we're done, but yeah.
But at least show you them again one more time, and we'll see how many more we have in the tent. We had about 3 in there just now, so we'll see how many more we get in the tent.
All right. Well, thank you, Gabby.
All right.
We'll be here.
I'll catch you guys at the end. So I'll hop on at maybe like 4:45.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, so we're gonna cancel that spotlight. I was out in the field with them a couple of weeks ago to do the same thing. We did not catch nearly as many birds, so this was a good day. So basically, the way that they catch the birds, Gabby had said they use decoys and this rocket net. So the little decoys are just statues, plastic statues of the birds that they put out. So it draws in the birds, and they say, okay, there must be a cool spot to go sit. And then the rocket net, the biologists will be sitting in the truck, and they use like a little detonator to shoot off these little tiny rockets, and that throws the net over the birds really, really quickly, because the birds can can fly at this point. So when we banned Canada geese in the summer, it's a different story. You have to you have to kind of wrangle them with kayaks and like herd them like sheep because they go through a flightless period. When birds can fly, it's tricky to catch them. So this is a really cool study. This is going to give us a lot of information about the movements of these birds. Atlantic brant breed in the Arctic, so they are not here. They're only here in the winter. This is a good way to track their movements, not only just here in the bay and how they're interacting with aquaculture operations throughout Rhode Island, but also you know, tracking their movements in the migration and breeding season as well. So it's a really cool project. Really excited that we can be a part of it. And this is just one of the many collaborations that we've done with URI that really helps us get a lot of data and information that we cannot collect ourselves just because of staff limitations and staff time. So Jenny is the only person who's studying waterfowl at the division. So this is really great for her to be able to partner with folks to gather data for the betterment of our management practices for these birds. Okay, so that was a little out of order, but it's always exciting to get out in the field. So we wanted to kick it off with that. So let's kind of backtrack and let's kind of cover the basics now. So we're talking about sea ducks today primarily. So what is a sea duck? Because some folks may have never even heard of a sea duck. Aren't all ducks the same? So a sea duck is very different from your regular dabbling ducks. So the duck family is called Anatidae. That's the Latin name that we give to ducks collectively. So there's a subfamily for sea ducks called Merganae, and the difference between sea ducks and dabbling ducks is their feeding strategy. So we have a goldeneye. This is actually a goldeneye here. You can't see his eye, but we'll see some better pictures in a bit. So goldeneye, scaup, things like common eider. These are what we'd call sea ducks because they're diving down into the water. They spend a lot of time in the salt water, but there are diving ducks that do not spend time in salt water or very little. But they're very different from a dabbling duck. So if you've ever seen mallards in the park, they're doing this, right? Bottoms up, beak is down in the mud, and they're sifting through, looking for plants and bugs and things like that. But they never actively submerge themselves underneath the water. They're always like partially, they're kind of like puddle ducks, like if you've ever heard that phrase. So sea ducks spend a decent amount of time on salt water. They're pretty site faithful, so it's kind of cool, you know, when you go out and look at these birds, and that's why it's awesome that we can track them. So the birds that Tori and Jenny are trapping, it's highly likely that they're going to turn back up in Narragansett Bay next year because they're pretty site faithful as to where they're going to go to spend their winter, where they go to breed. But the interesting thing about sea ducks is that they have a delayed maturity, so they don't breed until they're 2 or 3 years old. And they only lay about 4 to 6 eggs, so that's actually a fairly small amount of eggs. Something like a wood duck, which is a very common duck here in Rhode Island, a freshwater duck. We set up wood duck boxes. If anybody's ever seen like a big like nest box over a pond or along a stream or river, those are wood duck boxes. So we've built those. Volunteers build them. When we check them, so Jenny and her techs will check those every year. There could be upwards of a dozen eggs in that one box. So that's you know, that 4 to 6 egg clutch size for a sea duck is pretty tiny in comparison. The ducklings are raised on open water, which is also pretty dangerous. You know, so it's something that can limit their survival because there's a lot of things that could eat you on open water, and there's a lot of exposure to the elements out there. But despite all of this, they're pretty long-lived. Some of them can live even 12 to 15 years. So it's very cool that they're, you know, they live a hard life, you know, out there migrating, spending time on the ocean, but they can live a pretty long time. However, all of these things, all these characteristics that make sea ducks, you know, that slower reproduction, they need a stable environment because if something changes in the site that they always go to every winter, say the food source changes, say there's some sort of development, if something disturbs them there, you know, they're not so apt to colonize a new area. They're not just going to be like, oh yeah, I guess I'll go check it out over there. They're a little hesitant to do that. So that's all of these things combined have led to management decisions to be conservative in our harvest rates for these birds because sea ducks are game species. So they are hunted. There's a season for hunting them in Rhode Island. There's far fewer sea duck hunters than there are freshwater ducks or dabbling ducks. Most people are going for mallards and wood ducks if you're a waterfowl hunter, but sea ducks are a little less popular. It's a bit of a different game. You know, you got to be on open water and everything. It's cold. But we're pretty conservative in our harvest rates to allow harvest, but also to, not to over harvest. So we give those populations a little bit of a break so that they can replenish themselves and remain sustainable. So that's why studies like this, that we're doing on the Brant study, even just tracking birds, banding birds is critical data that we look at year after year. And we'll talk about some other methods of monitoring these birds and their populations. So where do they live? So we have them here, obviously, in the Narragansett Bay in the winter, but in the summertime and in the spring and the fall, it's a different story. So I have this is a surf scoter, just an example of a sea duck that we have here on the coast. So we've got, in red, we have the breeding range of the surf scoter. Then we have the yellow is our migration range or staging. So when they migrate, they kind of hang out in certain places to rest, refuel, and then they continue their journey. And then you can see all this blue along the coast. We've got, two distinct sections. So we have a Pacific winter range, and we have an Atlantic winter range, all the way down into the Gulf even for these birds. So you can see that it's very different. They're up here in the inner reaches of Canada. So some of these birds actually breed on boreal forest lakes. And as you can imagine, that's very difficult to get there. Very inaccessible environments. They're very remote. They'll even hang out on Bay Islands, way up here in Canada. Eider will breed up in here. And some birds will even breed a little bit down into New England. I've definitely seen common eider while up in Maine. I've seen they are breeding on the Boston Harbor Islands, and we did even have one nest of common eider here in the Narragansett Bay. But for the most part, they're really far up into Canada, and then they make their way down for the winter. So they're, when you think of birds flying south for the winter, we think the rainforest, but their winter vacation is here, which is a little different than you might expect. They're not going down to Florida for the most part. Okay, so here's some little bit of trivia. So I love to encourage participation. So if you want to type your answers in the chat, I'd love to hear them. So what makes a duck seaworthy? What are some adaptations that we think might enable these birds to live on the water? So I'm seeing webbed feet, absolutely. Oil glands, feathers. Anything else? Their bill shape, right? Their feeding habits. They dive deep to be able to get food. Right. These are all great guesses. So absolutely. Oops, if I could get this to move forward. So they have thick down. So those feathers that we're talking about, the thickest of any bird down is eider down, or some of the softest. So if you've ever seen like an eider down jacket, they're probably pretty expensive because it's some of the warmest down you can get. So this is a blob of that eider down. So in some places they do harvest down, and the way that they do that is they'll go around and after the birds are done nesting, they'll go out and they'll look at the nest and they'll pull up the layer of down. So the mother birds will pull out that down to line their nest to keep their eggs nice and warm. So they'll go out and pull that after the birds have left and done their thing. That's one adaptation. The fluffier your feathers, the more air you can trap close to your body and the warmer you can stay. But for their waterproofing, there's those contour feathers on the body. Those are those smooth, kind of silky looking feathers that create the body's shape. Those are the really truly waterproof feathers where they're spreading that oil as they're preening. The oil glands are typically at the tail of the bird. So if you ever see a bird, poking around at their tail and then they start running their beak over their feathers, they're preening, they're re-oiling and resealing all of their feathers. That's one great adaptation. Another cool thing that they have is called countercurrent heating. So if you've ever looked at these birds and you're looking at those little brant feet and their little legs with their bands on them, saying, oh, there's no feathers on their legs. How do they not get frostbite in the water or on the snow? So it's really cool the way it works is that there's their arteries and their veins run really close together without getting like too much into anatomy. Your arteries are taking your blood out to your extremities, And you can see the temperature goes from 35, 30, 20, 10. So it's losing heat as it's going away from the core of the body. And then the veins are bringing that back from the extremities to the core. But as the blood is coming back from those cold little toes, it's so close to that artery that there a little bit of that heat from the artery, that core blood that's pumping out, is transferring a little bit of that heat to the blood that's coming back in that's cold. So the blood that's coming back in isn't as cold as it would be. We're seeing it's going down to like 10 degrees, 9 degrees here, but it's back up to 33 degrees by the time it's coming back up to the core of the body. So it's a really cool way that birds do this, so that their little toes don't get frozen. So they also have a compact body and wings, and their legs are set pretty far back on their body. So if you've ever watched mallards waddling around at the park, you see that they get these little legs here, and they look pretty stable on the ground. But if you look at this guy, this is a diving duck. See how those legs are set a little further back? They're a little off kilter, and their chest is kind of elevated, so they look a little lopsided when they're standing up, and that's all to help them swim. So those legs that are set far back are easier for them to kick and move in the water, and their body is pretty compact, whereas the dabbling ducks, they're not going to be able to swim with those little legs in the middle of their body. And lastly, they have a lobed back toe. So most birds, we've all seen duck feet, right? They're webbed toes. But the back toe, usually birds have a little, you can kind of see it on this picture. You can see that little nub there on the back of the duck's foot. They always have like that little tiny back toe. But sea ducks have a lobed back toe. So this is not a lobed back toe. This is a lobed full foot. Here, this is a grebe, and grebes notoriously have these cool feet that looks like so lobed, like your earlobe. They kind of act like a little extra paddle. Very cool. I love grebe feet. I think they're so cute with those little lobed toes. So lots of great adaptations. So, do you think you could dive like a sea duck? Well, let's see. So, how deep can sea ducks dive? What do we think? Let's toss them in the chat. 100 feet, 60 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 50 feet. Yeah, these are all good guesses. 70 feet. So we're all over the place. All right, let's see. What is our consensus here? So on average, they feed at about 10 to 65 feet deep. So if you're looking at birds off of Beavertail, that's a great, Beavertail State Park is a great place to see sea ducks in the winter. It's awesome. You can just walk around and you have a panoramic view of all the ducks. That water there isn't outrageously deep. They'll go further out in the bay, 65 feet deep. The long-tailed duck, which we'll see a picture in a little bit, has been found in water depth of up to 200 feet, which is like wild. They are able to do that. So they've been like caught in like fishing nets before, and they're like, what? There's a duck down here? So they can dive really deep when they want to. Okay, so how long are they underwater? How long do you think that dive even lasts? In the chat here. So we'll say in seconds. That'll be our go-to. All right, 40 seconds. Anybody else? 120 seconds, 600 seconds, 3 minutes, 90 seconds. All right. So they average about 10 to 30 seconds per dive. So they're going down. You can imagine if you're down 10 feet, you might just dive down, grab something, come back up. It's about 10 to 30 seconds. And the cool thing about them is that when they dive, they have all these amazing metabolic adaptations. So their whole body reduces the amount of oxygen that it uses. So their heart rate goes down. The oxygen is only sent really to the nervous system, and their muscles and their organs switch to anaerobic metabolism. So if you've ever taken a bio class, you remember like aerobic and anaerobic respiration. So when you don't have oxygen, that's anaerobic. So there's like a whole, we're not going to go fully into it, but it's basically their muscles switch to a totally different way of functioning that does not require oxygen. When the water hits their nostrils, there's a reflex that switches their body into this metabolic response. And then when they decide that they want to, they resurface, they just stop swimming, and then they release compression in their feathers. So when they dive, they actually just like squeezing air out of a Ziploc bag. They just stick their feathers close to their body, and that helps them to sink because ducks are pretty buoyant, right? So then they'll kind of hang out on the surface 10 to 30 seconds, and then they dive back down. So usually you'll see when you go out to watch them, you'll see them all like one will decide to dive, and then two, and then all 50 of them go down at the same time. So you just have to wait 10 to 30 seconds, and then you'll be able to see the ducks again. All right, so what's on the sea duck menu? What do we think they're eating down there in the ocean? Check our chat. We're seeing fish. Fish, lots of fish. Aquatic vegetation, yeah. Some grasses, crabs, crustaceans. Absolutely. So our sea ducks are eating lots of different things. So most definitely aquatic plants, any of the little bugs or invertebrates that are living in those plants, crabs. So we could see a surf scoter here with a little crab, mussels even. So that is like, blows my mind about these guys. They go down, they pull up the mussels and they swallow them whole. And their gizzard, which is the structure, one of their digestive structures, it crushes the shell, and they're able to pass that, digest it, and then pass it out the other end, which is pretty cool. So I don't know anybody who can do that. Eat a whole mussel, and also small fish. It depends on their beak shape too. So we're gonna get to see some pictures of all different birds up close, and we'll take a look at their beaks. All right, so a quick winter waterfowl ID crash course if you're planning on heading to the coast in the next few weeks. Just some friends you might see. So the common eider we've talked about, I've referenced a few times now. Gorgeous bird. So this is the male, this is the female. So males typically in the waterfowl world are very beautiful and colorful, and they've got all the nice field markings. Females are typically drab and brown, or their field markings are much more muted, and that's because these ladies are sitting on the nest, and they nest on the ground, so they have to be able to blend in to avoid predators. So the males are all show. They want to attract the mate, so they got to look really beautiful. So common eider, one of the most common birds you'll probably see out there on the water. We have 3 different types of scoters. So we've talked about the surf scoter just because it's my favorite because of his cool beak, that beautiful white eye. The white-winged scoter, so as aptly named, has a little bit of white in the wing and then some white winged eyeliner on that eye right there. So all of these are males. And then the black scoter, pretty self-explanatory, black feathers, that nice orange beak. And most of the time you don't hear the birds, like they don't make any quacking noises, but if you hear like a light mee whistling noise while you're out on the water, it's usually the black scoter. They make a little whistling whine. The Harlequin, my personal favorite duck. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous bird. Just all these beautiful colors and markings. These guys, there's actually a closed hunting season on them here in the state because their populations, we don't know enough about them, or they're not doing as well as we'd like, so they just closed the season, can't harvest them, to give them that time to recuperate. Scaup. So scaup are very tricky. I struggle with scaup. Usually when I see them out there, I say, it's a scaup. So, and I don't try to go lesser or greater, but can anybody spot the difference? I'm curious if anybody can spot the difference between these two. I'll go to the chat. I'm saying greenish on neck, head shape. Absolutely. So Mary Beth, you got it. So the head shape, absolutely. So it's easy to see on these guys because we're nice and close. So the greater scaup has like this rounded head shape. The lesser scaup has kind of like a little tuft, like his hair's been combed up a little bit. This is very hard to do. When I'm looking through binoculars, I still can't do it. So I just say it's a scaup. Goldeneye. So this is the bird that they'll be catching next year in conjunction with that Brent project. So we've got 2 different goldeneye, the common, which as you can guess is more common, and the barrows, which shows up in the state. Every year we get you see a couple people reporting them on eBird. Both beautiful, beautiful birds, really colorful and sleek looking. Another one of my favorites, the Buffle Head. These little guys are very tiny, and they look like little marshmallows on the water. They are very fun to watch. They're very energetic, gorgeous iridescence, and that big white puffy head. And then the Mergansers. So these guys are very comical. I love this hooded Merganser. He looks like he's telling a joke, waiting for somebody to laugh at it. So hooded Merganser, They breed here in the state. They're here pretty much year round. They breed in fresh water, and they'll use the wood duck boxes that we put up. But in the winter, you can see them on salt marshes and estuaries, not necessarily on the open water. Red-breasted merganser you'll see out on the waves with the eider and the Skoda. And common merganser, I threw this guy in here because he's not really a sea duck, but it is a winter species of waterfowl that we do see that you would be if you're on like a freshwater lake or a big pond. This is where you'd see these guys. And you can see they've got this long beak. It's very different from all the other beaks that we've seen. So it's kind of long and it's serrated. These guys are fish eaters. So that long serrated bill is perfect for catching little fish. The long-tailed duck, this is our deep diver, aptly named with that very long plume at the end of their tail. This is a male. And then we got those two red and gray guys. So these guys, you'll see them out on the water. They'll be in estuaries. Trustham Pond is usually a good place. I've seen both canvasback and redhead there. So canvasback is that dark red eye, you know, this kind of sloping nose, a little darker overall. The redhead has that nice like grayish, that little golden eye, and the beak is much lighter too. They're kind of rounder looking than the canvasback. Canvasback is more angular looking. And of course the Atlantic brant, whom you have met. So smaller, just a smaller goose. They are very small though. When I see them out, you know, with my binoculars, I'm like, oh, that's a goose, you know. And I held one a couple weeks ago and going, oh my gosh, she's so small. So they are a little bit petite. They're a little smaller than our Canada goose. And of course, you know, there's other winter birds out there that are not ducks or waterfowl. We get loons, common loons and red-throated loons will make the Narragansett Bay their home during the winter. And you can't miss a loon. They're huge. They're absolutely enormous. They get that big dagger bill. They're really awesome to get to watch, you know, over the winter. And as you can see, they're kind of drab. They don't look like what you think a loon should look like. So they're in their non-breeding plumage. So a lot of birds will molt their beautiful breeding feathers, and they'll put on a kind of a less colorful outfit for the winter. You can still see they've kind of got that reddish eye that you always associate with the loon. Occasionally we get snowy owls. For the past few years, snowy owls have been showing up, and you can usually see them in coastal habitats because they breed on the tundra, so they're already kind of in an open area. So they like open spaces. So any of like our open sand dunes, Statuus Point in Middletown is a great spot because there's a lot of grassland and open coastal habitat there. So if you get to see a snowy owl, it's a lucky day. We also get grebes. So this is horned grebe. He doesn't have his horns, but we get usually two different grebes, the horned grebe and the pied-billed. They get those lobed toes. Cute little birds, speedy though. They're tough to catch, so they're like, they go down in the water. And then we have these two little black and white guys, so the razorbill and the dovekie. Pretty uncommon in the state, but I've seen razorbills flying off of beaver tail. I've never seen a dovekie, not yet, but they do show up. So you never know what you're going to see out there because things in the winter and during migration, they just kind of pop up places. So keep an eye out. I hope you guys get out to see some of these birds. So some of the other conservation work we're doing, other than, you know, radio tracking and the GPS tracking with those little backpacks, we contribute to regional monitoring efforts. Here's Jenny and Megan, and they're ready to go up in the helicopter. And they fly over the bay every winter, and they do a midwinter waterfowl count, which, as you can imagine, is pretty tricky to count ducks from a moving helicopter. Jenny sent me some photos, and I could barely see the birds. So they're far away. You know, it's hard to do. But this gives us an estimate of how many birds are overwintering. You can kind of see trends from year to year. You know, are we seeing fewer brant in the bay? Are we seeing fewer eider or more? So what's going on from year to year? U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does monitor the harvest each year. So across the flyway, so we're part of the Atlantic flyway. So I think of flyways like highways. The Atlantic flyway is just the highway that birds on the Atlantic coast typically take in their migration routes, going either north or south. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will reach out to hunters throughout the flyway, and they'll request wings from hunters. So you can actually, waterfowl, it's amazing. If you spread their wing, you can tell a lot about a bird. You can tell whether it's male or female. You can tell the age of the bird, relative age. So they request wings from folks to just kind of get a sampling of the birds that were harvested to get a age and sex ratio. Only about 5 hunters per year from Rhode Island are called, because we don't have that many people in the state. So in comparison, we're a smaller state in comparison to others, but about 5 people get that call every year. We've also contributed to the Ocean Special Area Management Plan that was done in response to the Block Island wind farm. So there were some studies done on bird movements because they're putting this offshore. So you can imagine we want to find out, is this going to impact our ducks that are here, that are wintering here? So very important study, and determined where they were going to plan to put those turbines wasn't going to affect the birds in any way. The birds seem to avoid it, or they're feeding. They prefer to feed in other areas other than exactly where the turbines are. And of course, URI master species. We've worked with postdocs to study movements, and one of those studies is exemplified in this crazy map right here. But essentially, what this graph is doing is it's looking at movements of birds, of 5 different species of birds. So it's eider, long-tailed duck, and then 3 scoters. To look, and this is data that's been compiled from numerous studies, not just from Rhode Island, but from across US and Canada, to track these 5 species. And basically what it's saying is, how much time are the birds spending, whether it's breeding, migrating, or wintering. So blue is representative of the winter. Green and yellow are our migration period. So yellow is the fall, green is the spring. And then the red is the breeding period. So as you can see in these little pie charts, without going like crazy in detail, these pie charts, you can see there's some red, but most of the pie chart is yellow, green, and blue. So these birds spend an exorbitant amount of time traveling and spending the winter somewhere else. So this is just showing us how important our staging areas. You can see all this along the East Coast. This is super, super important for our birds. And so it would behoove us to make sure that these habitats, these staging areas, or the wintering habitats, are kept just as pristine as the breeding habitats, because they're just as important for the survival of the birds as those places way up in the far reaches of Canada. A really cool study. Juliet Lamb was the postdoc who compiled this data at URI. Okay, so I'm at my question slide, but I know Gabby is back, so I'd like to hop back to Gabby. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. We're good. We got about 10 minutes. So Gabby, I'm going to make you the spotlight again.
All right.
And
Hello again. I'm back. I banded 2 geese in the downtime. And we still have more to go. We've done quite a few. So I'll show you how many we have left in how many we have banded so far in the tent since you last checked in. See how many are in here. I was giving you some winter landscape. It was talking in case anyone wanted to see. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, I've got quite a few in there now. So I banded quite a few. We have another couple of crates worth to do. But I can show you one more time. It looks like Shannon has a goose that she's working on right now. Okay. She's sectioning it, and then she's going to start putting the bands on.
Okay. Oh, we have a question in the chat. How are the transmitters attached, and how long do they stay on? So those transmitters, like Gabby said, it's like a little backpack. I don't know if Gabby can show another one with a transmitter. But basically, the little cables run underneath the wings, and then they kind of crisscross under the breast of the bird. And then it's what Tori's doing is she is preening in those little backpack straps, so they're nice and comfy in the feathers, so it's not too loose, not too tight on the bird. And effectively that should stay on the bird for the remainder of its life. And the cool thing about Tori's transmitters is that they're solar powered. So traditionally the transmitter, you have a battery in it. When the battery dies, that's the end of your data. But these guys are going to be able to recharge the batteries while they're on the birds. So Tori, I was chatting with her a couple weeks ago, and she said that they're hoping to keep them on for a year or two, at least get the data running from them for a year or two, which is great, because usually you have like this technology has improved greatly, because it used to be like, you might get like a month out of it, and then when it first started, then it dies. But yeah, for the most part, it seems like they can go for about a year. Our bobcat tracking study, the collar lasts for a year, and that's not solar powered. That's just a regular battery. Yeah, the smaller the transmitter, the smaller the battery, and the less time you have on it. So these solar ones are pretty interesting. That's the first time I've seen the solar ones on this project.
I was just going to mention, so we we put transmitters on 15 birds today, and that was all the rest that got put out. So we don't need to trap Brent anymore. So we're all done now. So you guys were lucky that you got a chance to see it because we got so many today. We're able to get the rest of them out, which is just great.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, well, this might be a good time because we've got Gabby now. We can take some questions. We're happy to take questions. We've got, we're about 10 minutes to 5. We're happy to stay past 5. We understand if folks have to duck out, but we're happy to answer your questions about sea ducks, about any of the work that we do at Fish and Wildlife.
I like your duck out, Mary.
What's that? Oh, we can duck out. Yeah. Pun intended. Jim's saying, I'm amazed how cooperative the birds are. If they were saw-whet owls, everyone's fingers would be bleeding. Yes. You'd be surprised actually how like I've seen saw-whet banding. It's pretty quiet. But Canada Goose banding most definitely is I won't say dangerous, but they will bite you, they will kick you. These little guys are very, very, very quiet.
Yeah, these guys, so I did have a couple try to bite me, but they actually don't have a very big, very strong bite at all. I actually bit myself with the pliers when I was banding.
Pliers are more dangerous than ducks.
Yes.
Yeah, the black ducks are like that too. Yeah, when we went out banding black ducks, they just sit there. I'm like, oh, don't eat me. I think that's kind of their strategy is that if I don't move, maybe I won't get eaten. It's pretty good. And this is a little longer process because of the transmitters. But for the most part, they're working on keeping the birds as low stress as possible. That's why that little tent is good. They can kind of go there and relax. Trisha's asking, do you ever use volunteers? Absolutely. So this project is kind of wrapping up, but we do take volunteers out for American black duck banding. That is very, very early in the morning, but Canada Goose banding happens late June, early July, and we welcome volunteers to come out for that. We've had a lot of volunteers come out and wrangle the geese, and you get to band geese, you get in the kayak. So whatever you're comfortable with, we're happy to let you participate. We have live tracking like great white sharks. So we're not tracking sharks with Fish and Wildlife, but I'm not sure if this how these transmitters, how Tori's able to check, like if she's able to like check on an app like they do with the sharks. You can see like, oh, shark is over here. I'm not sure what her software she's using to check up on them and how often the transmitters data. Some transmitters emit data like once every 3 hours or twice a day, but I'm not sure how frequent these guys emit a signal. Great question. Any other questions? I'm watching the chat.
Just so you know, Tori just informed me they're getting a location every hour right now on the transmitter.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Okay, we've got another question. You mentioned Beavertail State Park. Any other outstanding places for seeing a variety of sea ducks? Absolutely. So Satchewest Point National Wildlife Refuge in Middletown is a great spot. Trustham Pond National Wildlife Refuge. It's not necessarily saltwater. It is a freshwater pond, but you can see the beach from some of the overlooks. The Charlestown Breachway is a great spot. I always see loons there. You can see loons like super close in the breachway. You just sit in the parking lot and they're right there floating around the breachway. And along the beach too, you can walk on the beach. Oh, Black Point, Gabby's saying Black Point is a great spot.
Yeah, that's really nice. Cold State Park.
If you're not like, if you don't want to go all the way down south, I've talked to folks from Cranston. I did a presentation for the Edgewood Garden Club this summer, and a couple of ladies there, they go to Patuxent Cove, that little park right there, Patuxent Village. You can sit, and she's like, I see Brant, I see Mergansers, all sorts of birds. So you can even see them in the upper reaches of the bay. You don't have to go down all the way to the south coast to see them. Yeah, so I would say I've seen some interesting things in Providence, and where Gabby is, Colt State Park in Bristol. I would check out even the Audubon Nature Center in Bristol has a lovely little path that goes out, crosses the East Bay Bike Path, and there's some nice little overlooks there. If you want a more quiet, like a more natural setting than the park. Yeah, there's places all around the state. That's the beauty of the ocean state. We've got so much waterfront, and there's probably something to see everywhere. Gabby, I'm gonna bring up, so I'm gonna cancel your video just so I can bring up our little question screen so folks can see. If you have any interest in future programs, excuse me, in future programs, you can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. And if you're not on social media, you can also just check out our website, dem.ri.gov/wildlife outreach. And we post, we have a little calendar there for future events like these. So we've got some more virtual programs coming up. We're really crossing our fingers for the day that we can get back in the swing of things and do in-person programs, because one of my favorite programs to run is Come Birding with Me in the winter, and we go to Beavertail and we look at the ducks and we have binoculars for everybody and little field guides. So we do this in the field, this whole program outdoors as well. But you know, the day will come. Well, we'll be back. We'll be back with everybody. So I'm just going to check our chat one more time. I'm not seeing any more questions. So I think class dismissed. Thank you all so much for coming. We greatly appreciate your participation. We hope you learned something new today, and enjoy the snow. It's snowing outside my window, very tiny little flakes.
I think it stopped here now. Thank you all. Thanks for coming out.
Awesome. So I'm going to close out here. I'm going to stop recording.